Again, there is no underpinning paper, so you don't need any prior knowledge of taxation to answer this paper. It is self-sufficient. As with the law paper, then the main paper is based upon UK tax, but as I mentioned, then you can choose to take one of the variants. Again, just mentioned a few of them here: Russia, China, Hungary, Czech Republic, all have their own tax variation. So again, depending upon what part of the world you come from, have a look at the ACCA website. Do they do a variant for your country? Maybe that's what you should take for that choice. Or if you're not in the tax profession, then probably doesn't matter too much, especially if you're not going to use any tax knowledge in your future career as such. So you make the choice. For most, or certainly for the main paper and most variants, then some taxes are common and will be examined. So personal and business tax are common to all of these papers. The actual tax legislation will be different, maybe between UK legislation and Russian legislation, but there will be within the syllabus a question on personal, a question on business or corporation taxes. With tax, it's very much a learning and remembering exam, because in most cases it's a written exam, and if you can remember the tax rules, if you can practice past questions and to some extent memorize how to structure a question, then you will pass that particular question and hopefully pass the paper. One point to note is don't expect the rules necessarily to be logical. In many cases, tax isn't logical. And really what we've got to say for this paper is don't question the legislation. There's really no scope in the exam for you to question the law and the tax legislation. It is very much, this is it. This is the law that has been passed by a particular government. This is how it's got to be applied in a given tax scenario. So do be aware of that. As I mentioned before, then there is no assumed tax knowledge required, but you may decide in your professional papers to take the advanced tax, the P6 paper, as one of your optional papers. I should point out with P6 there is no local variants involved in there, so it's pretty much UK tax at the P6 level. In terms of the questions, questions 1 and 2 will total 55 marks. It could be a 30-25 or it could be 25-30. One will be on personal, one will be on corporation tax, and the other 3 questions, 3 to 5, will be 15 marks each. It will be mainly calculations, mainly numbers, but sometimes there will be a written element. One of the reasons students may fail here is that they ignore the written element. So don't ignore it. Again, I go back to the fact that if you don't answer a particular part of a question, you get 0 marks. If you do answer it, then you might get 1 mark, and that 1 mark might take you over the pass mark that you need. Point to note then that one of my colleagues have mentioned in terms of issues that students tend to have is be very careful on reading the question that you pick up the correct dates as mentioned on there. With tax papers, the dates are doubly important. The tax papers change each year as tax legislation changes each year. So you've got to make sure that you are so up to date on your dates and that you are studying the tax legislation for the correct tax paper that you're taking, for the correct year that you're taking the paper. So be extremely careful on the dates and make sure that you're picking up correct dates and therefore feeding into the correct calculations. For much of F6, the tax legislations, you can use standardized workings. And again, whatever study text you will be using, they will have standardized workings for a personal tax calculation or a corporate tax calculation. Use those study text standardized workings. Don't structure your own workings. Don't come up with something different. Here, we've really got to say you've got to follow the workings that are given to you. The lecturers that have written the F6 study text, they know how to structure a solution, structure a working so that you get the solution as quickly and easily as possible. So your performer layouts, learn them. Read the examiner's comments. Again, that's really standard for all the papers. And for F6, again, learn the tax rules. For some students, especially those in the marginal levels, the 40s, then time management does seem to be a bit of an issue. So what we mean by time management is you've got 3 hours for the paper. You've got to make sure that you apportion those 3 hours evenly, equally throughout the paper for every question. It's no use spending 2 hours, let's say, on questions 1 and 2, because you've spent a disproportionate amount of time on those 2 questions. It means that you can't spend a proportionate amount of time on the remaining 3 questions.